Hi, y'all. Welcome to Married to a Shrink. This is Allie Johnson Calderon here, seasons licensed counselor and couples therapist. And in this episode, we are going to have discussions about forgiveness and how to craft a appropriate apology and all the dynamics that come with the healing components of a relationship. And my co-pilot alongside me, as always, my husband, Michael. Michael, let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Michael here. Look forward to this discussion.
Yeah, about apologies. And so the first kind of question coming at you is, how do you feel that forgiveness is, let me rephrase, how would you define forgiveness in the context of our relationship?
Well, first, I think I'll be a little sly here. What do I have to apologize for?
Yeah, right.
When have I ever do anything that I need to apologize for?
Yeah, because it's not maybe an every other day thing. Totally, 100%.
No, but no, really, in all honesty, apologies are something that I've got a lot of experience with our relationship.
Sounds so bad. Okay, elaborate.
I like to think I'm the perfect husband and perfect father, but that's just not reality. I'm human. I want to be those things, but I do fall short from time to time, and I need to address it. So I think coming into this relationship, apologizing looked different than what it looks like today after being partnered with you for as many years as we've been together. Mm-hmm. Were you asking me how do I apologize or what do I apologize for?
Well, we can move into that. Do you feel like you struggle to apologize?
I think my knee-jerk reaction in the moment, sometimes I struggle. My instinct initially is to get defensive and like, what did I do to merit an apology? I don't necessarily say that, but that's psychologically in my mind, I think what happens. I feel like the switch when it goes on in my head in terms of I did something here, I need to address this, I need to address it now and handle this the right way. That comes, I think, somewhat unnatural. But that's what I've been working towards acknowledging and improving upon. I think I'm getting there.
When you say it's unnatural, what makes you uncomfortable in that initial, because to your point, I do affirm that I do think initially you move into defensiveness. And so what's triggered in you when that defensiveness comes into play?
I think it comes from years of being told by my parents, from my friends about how I'm this perfect guy, and you can do no wrong. I think that's where it stems from, and it's a blow to that psyche when I do something that doesn't align with that, and it's tough to acknowledge with myself, like, hey, I got out of line here. I'm not perfect, and I know I'm not, but it's still tough to acknowledge.
That's fair. I mean, I think the Calderons do heighten and do love their firstborn very much. I agree that it is part of that perfectionism and how that hits that, and then you get upset with yourself, and then you also get defensive. But I also think it's that accountability component that I think you have a hard time with.
It does.
So what about the accountability and someone holding you accountable for something that is threatening for you?
Well, I think the accountability and the not being perfect, I think they closely align with each other. There's a certain amount of acknowledgement that needs to take place before you can hold yourself accountable. And if you're not seeing what you're doing is wrong, you don't feel that there's a need to be accountable for it.
Yeah. Because I think your initial default a lot of the times is, well, that wasn't my intent. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I recognize that your intent is not malicious. I know that you love and care for me deeply, but the intent doesn't matter if I'm not feeling seen and heard in the outcome of your actions, right? And the outcome of your words.
No, you're really big, and it's not wrong, but it's about the action, not just the intent.
And like we've talked about in other episodes, diction is really important.
Diction's very important with you.
But it's important in dynamics because words have a lot of meaning. And if they're said in one, the word itself can have a lot of meaning, but the tone has even more meaning than anything else. And so if have a raised, aggressive tone, but you're saying something kind or apologetic or apology-like, to me, it's not an apology, right? It takes away, because if you're giving the correct words, but you're in a tone that isn't respectful, then to me, the apology is null and void.
Sure. And I don't remember the statistic, but I remember learning years ago that tone is more important than the words. And I don't, it was like 60% is the
I think
tone.
it's higher than that. Yeah.
It's a majority. It's a majority. But to your point, diction matters. I know there's a commercial that I've seen during the Olympics talking about there's all these people from foreign lands talking about how hard it is to learn English and with regards to words. And they were saying how it's difficult because so many words have different meanings. And they started going through what some of the most
You're talking about
difficult.
the Jesus campaign.
I am.
Yeah.
But, they were most of the ones they were talking about were emotional words.
Yeah.
And I think it ends with, the most difficult word is I think love or something.
Yeah.
But it just touched base. It strikes a chord with me in terms of diction and how diction matters and how a word in our language can mean so many different things. And the tone is really what sets the tone for how it's received.
Because it's like, if you're yelling at someone that you love them and that's why they shouldn't leave you, it's a very different, not that you have done this, I'm just saying like that is very different than caressing someone's hand and being like, I really love you, right?
For sure.
It's completely different context. And so with that, besides tone, what are the dictional components that you think or what you have learned to be part of a sincere and appropriate apology? Like what are the components?
So I may not have the right diction in terms of what the clinical true apology should look like, but from what I've learned from our years of partnership and the countless number of apologies that I've made and you telling me, try that one again. First of it's acknowledging, a certain amount, accepting responsibility and acknowledging, hey, I did something here. Being empathetic, I understand, where you're coming from. I could see why what I said or what I did hurt you. I usually follow up and say that wasn't my intent. I understand that intent isn't it. Talk about what my future state is going to look like. In the future, I'm going to do better. I'm going to say this or not do this. Those are the big things that I can think of. So let me see if I'm rehashing this correctly for myself. Acknowledgement, empathy, what the course of action is going forward.
I'm laughing because you nailed it. You did such a great job. Yet you actually doing that, I feel like doesn't happen frequently.
I tend to stumble on a step or two.
It feels like the first
initially.
step.
Initially.
It's the initial step for you. Like, babe, that was beautifully done. It was like I was speaking to another couple on my couch about it. Like that was perfect. But I do feel like application-wise, that is harder for you, especially that first accountability.
It's the first one.
Anytime you have hurt my feelings, and you hurt my feelings often because we're different people navigating family life and a marriage and work and just all the things that come with life and partnership. And so and I'm highly sensitive.
Very much so.
And so you will hurt my feelings. And I would say there's some consistency to that. You don't intend to, but whenever I am like, hey, that hurt my feelings, for whatever reason, it's hard for you to start with that step one. You know them, but it's hard for you to start with that step one.
Yeah, oftentimes, I feel like I jump right into the second step, and I understand you're hurt. I'll do this differently next time. It's the acknowledgement or the accountability piece. And I think it's some of what we were talking about at the top of the hour, about it being a strike against I'm this perfect person. And I find oftentimes that first, my acknowledgement and accountability, it seems to come, 5-10 minutes later. If we're on a phone call, I'll go through the first couple steps. I'll put the phone down, and a couple minutes later, I'm like, oh, I've internalized this. This makes sense to me. And then I'll send you a little.
You'll send me a text.
I'll send you a text, or I'll call you back, and you'll want to continue where we left off. And I'm like, no. I accept responsibility. We don't need to go through the whole ringer again. I accept responsibility and I acknowledge. But you're right. I still need to get better at doing that step first off and starting that forward.
Fair, but to be fair to you, I need to be better about not lengthening the process when you do re-engage on it to come back and do step one. I think for me, for whatever reason, I have a hard time when the steps are out of order because the lack of accountability is my trigger. Mm-hmm. And so when there isn't the accountability and the apology from the beginning, and you just move into the empathy and the next steps, for me, I'm like, yeah, but the biggest component is that you're not owning yourself, right? And so I need to figure out how to get better about knowing you and knowing that your trigger is when someone hits your ideology of perfectionism. And so, but what happens is both of our triggers go off at the same time, where you're not holding yourself accountable, which is my trigger, and you are feeling less than perfect, which is yours. And so it's like to your point, you just move into step 2 and 3, and I get heightened and I'm unable to really accept step 2 and 3 because I'm like, yeah, but step 1's the most important and you haven't done it, dude. Right? Mm-hmm. And so I need to be better about knowing you and knowing, and recognizing what your triggers are. And when I say, hey, Michael, like, this wasn't ideal for me, like, it made me feel XYZ, can maybe we do something different next time? Because that's normally how I present my information. I'm very, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm lovingly direct about when you have crossed a boundary for me or hurt my feelings or something. And I need to be better about knowing that initial is going to be defensive, and that I just need to let you be the defensive, and then the accountability will come, because it always does. But it's so hard for me when it's not the first thing. When it's not just like I get it, Allie. Totally see that. So sorry. Like, it's never that. And I think that, like, it's that ownership. It gets me every time.
Right off the bat. And that's what I have to get better about. Do you owe me an apology for how you handle things?
I don't know.
I didn't know if what you were trying to get across was an apology for you getting heightened, knowing that that's how I am. But I need to get better. I don't
know. I feel like when I say heightened, I never get aggressive.
No, you don't get aggressive.
I just get like, I'm not accepting this. And that's when you get upset. Because I hold a boundary to it where I'm just like, I'm not accepting this apology. And you get really mad. But I'm not going to accept an apology that doesn't have the accountability component to it. Because that's the grit of it. That's I own that I did wrong by you. And I'm going to make amends. Because that's what leads to healing and forgiveness. That's how you become strong and you move forward. Right? So I don't know, but also maybe I'm being defensive and like, I mean, I don't know. To me, that's like the meat and potatoes of it.
I think, the accountability, there's a reason why per your therapeutic knowledge, there's a reason it's the first. And I think it does set the stage, and I need to get better. And I acknowledge that I need to get better at starting off with that.
Yeah, because they're fair. But I think I need to be more patient sometimes with the process of you kind of working through your initial reactions and knowing that you're going to get there, because you always do.
I think part of it is it takes a little bit for me to internalize and to recognize what I've done. And when I see your initial reaction that, you being an HSP, a highly sensitive person, when you start to express your emotions,
But I'm not dramatic about it, though.
No, but it becomes clear, like, I've overstepped a boundary, or I said or did something, and sometimes in the moment, I don't know what it is. I want to derail whatever direction you're going in and get us back on track. So I think this is just kind of coming to me. I'm wondering if that's why I kind of jump right into stage 2. I'm not acknowledging it because I haven't even figured out what it is, but I did something. I just fell in a pothole, and I'm going to try to get us back on the road.
But I feel like that is an inaccurate characterization of me, because I feel like how that was just presented, it's as if I am reactive and you have no idea what you just did, but I am just being reactive. And I don't feel like that's an accurate portrayal of who I am, because I'm I'm not reactive. And then 2, you say you're driving too fast for my comfortability, right? This is a kind of a common thing. And I will say, hey, my love.
Parents, I don't drive too fast.
Well, no, I am just I get car sick. I get like all the things. And so sometimes we live in Austin in the hills, and so it is stinking windy on these roads, especially on 2222, which is like our main thoroughfare. And that road is so stinking windy. And no, you're not going above the speed limit. However, it's a lot. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
And so I start to get uncomfortable, and I will simply say, hey, my love, can you slow down a little bit? I'm starting to get uncomfortable. And instead of just being like, oh, of course, I'm sorry. I know that you get like
low grade.
You get like defensive. I'm not driving too fast. It's like you're not. But to me, I am uncomfortable. I am not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking for you to make me a little bit more comfortable in this situation as my partner. And so, but that's, I feel like, how I present things. But I feel like how I was characterized a few moments ago was like that I'm upset about something. I'm super reactive. You're unclear about what it is. And so, to quote you, you're avoiding a pothole and you're trying to get us back on track. And so you skip to step 2 and not hold yourself accountable, is how I took that.
I would not say that you're reactive, but when I cross one of your boundaries,
I do tell you.
You're very direct, and you're very quick to express it.
That's true.
And So while that doesn't mean that you're reactive, I think the way you're portraying it is that you're saying, I'm not saying you're dramatic.
I took the pothole and have to get us back on the road analogy, like as a token of like, Allie is starting to take us down like a dark road, and I am the one who has to pull us back, is how I took that.
I think it was kind of like I said a few episodes ago about the anthill to a molehill. Like, I'm trying to avoid the escalation of something.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe that's a better metaphor.
I think that's a better metaphor.
I take accountability for that.
And?
I am sorry. I will not use that analogy again.
In relation to this. Perfect. No, I think that's, yeah. To your point, I think that is kind of a better analogy towards what we're talking about. Because to me, I very much believe that you should. I'm also a people manager, and everything I've ever learned about leadership is when you see it, you say it, right? Like, you should give, when you're leading people, feedback should be timely, positive, and specific, right? Mm-hmm. And so this was never taught to me in residency or in grad school or anything, but I feel like it's very applicable also to relationships in the romantic variety, because I do feel like you can get down the road to resentment and other agitations when you don't just, when you see it or when you feel it, kindly say it with respect so that you can continue towards.
Oh, I think that's the timely feedback. I think is important. I mean, I think that's with regards to everything in life. Training a dog, if they do something wrong when you're, trying to potty train a puppy, you need to address it right then and there. If it's you missed your opportunity, if you don't provide that feedback to the dog. I think it's the same thing with children.
I was about to, not to compare children to dogs,
to animals, but
it's similar. And the specificity is also part of that, right? You can't do something nebulous like, you hurt my feelings, or I didn't like that. Like, that isn't helpful because you're going to repeat it because it wasn't specific. So you have to also be specific in terms of, hey, you hurt my feelings when you did X, Y, Z, right? Just like you would have to with a child, right? And say, hey, what you did X, Y, Z wasn't okay. We need to redirect and, go this way. It's the same type of component, to your point. It's like that timely, specific. And so, and I think it's because of that, the fact that it needs to be timely and specific, I think sometimes makes it challenging for you. Because if you've had a day of which there has been a series of boundary crosses or hurt feelings, I think for you, because I am timely and specific about my feedback, it can feel like there's a lot. Maybe some days. Is that part of maybe the defensiveness where you're cool the first couple if you're having an off day, or is that not part of it? I don't know.
No, I can't think of an instance where there's been a lot of those things in one single day.
I mean, I think there's, to your point, I think there are instances, but I don't think they're weekly occurrences. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't think that's a component.
Okay.
I don't think that's a component. I think it's just with regards to emotions, I take a little bit longer to process.
Yes, I don't disagree. I would say with everything, you take a little bit longer to process. Yes, your emotions, but also what you think and feel about anything. Feeling is emotions, but what you also think about something.
I'm very analytical, so yes, it does. I go through all the different scenarios in my mind, weighing the pros and cons, just in life in general. So I think that adds things. That adds time.
Yeah.
Now, in those moments with regards to emotions, I think because I'm not on your level of emotional intelligence and I'm not a highly sensitive person, I'll get a good cry in at a Disney movie any day of the week. But recognizing my opinion on something, I oftentimes have to weigh, we've struggled a lot with where are we going to go for dinner. And I usually look at you like I'm the puppy dog to the master.
Yes.
Where are we going for dinner? And you don't want to make that decision. You want to have a partner that provides some opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm segueing off track here.
We'll bring us back. It's cool.
But yes, emotions, I take a little bit longer to process.
Well, yes. And I think that's why we'll segue now like into forgiveness. So to you, what's forgiveness?
Forgiveness is accepting the apology and acknowledgement that we're going to move forward with whatever the rectifying situation is. We're going to move forward on it together. Sometimes I think it's okay. Sometimes we don't agree on something. I think that's normal. But we can acknowledge that, and we can agree that we're going to move forward in a loving and kind way.
Yeah. Why do you think forgiveness is hard for people?
I think people innately don't want to admit fault and admit when they're wrong. I think that's people's nature generally, is people, while they maybe not feel that they're perfect, I still think there's something to people that people just don't like admitting when they're wrong.
But I feel like that's more with an apology. I feel like the admission of wrong is with an apology.
You're talking about forgiveness?
But I'm talking about forgiveness. Like, why do you think it's hard for people to forgive? Because forgiveness, what comes after the apology and amends? Because forgiveness can't occur in a relational dynamic unless there's some sort of amends, right? That's part of the healing process, is the amends that comes after the apology. But I find with my couples, a lot of them will struggle to forgive. And, I've had a number of couples where we spend 7 sessions and we're just circulating back to the same old pain point of, and it's like, it's been apologized for, amends have been made. You've got to decide to forgive or not, right? But I'm just curious from your perspective, because I think my lens is so different.
Your lens is definitely different. I think you have an amazing gift, being able to forgive. I can forgive. I'm not saying I can't forgive. But I think, for speaking, I don't know what problems or issues they've had, but from my own personal experience, we can be in this life wronged, like truly wronged and hurt.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the actions of being wronged, the words of an apology, while they may be heartfelt and sincere and hit the three main points of an apology, that they don't align to the person that's really been hurt. I can speak to a past trauma I had. It tore me apart. And I spent, therapy and time and tons of financial resources. I wanted to forgive. But the words, which I don't think I ever truly got words, but had I received those words, it wouldn't have, in the judicial balance system, in my mind, it wouldn't have it wouldn't have balanced out. The actions were far worse than some words. So I
Because
think
you never got
that's
amends.
never got amends.
That's
Never. But I'm saying, had I received amends, I still think that's where people struggle is, I don't know, maybe you have to tell me what amends would potentially be, but speaking to an artificial couple,
yeah.
Somebody had an extramarital affair for a number of months or years, and they finally became clean with it or were caught. That person can get, and the person that did the physical act can apologize. And yes, the person that's accepting the apology has to give forgiveness or not. But I could see from being in those shoes, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, tell me therapeutically what you think.
I mean, I think 100%. But I think you're combining a few things there. And I think that's what a lot of folks do, right? Where it's like the apology, to your point, is just the words. And they need to be said. And so that is part of the component. But then afterwards is the amends, which are the actions associated with creating the sense of emotional safety again and building up the trust. Because you cannot truly reach forgiveness untrue. Trust is a component of maintaining a romantic relationship. And so if you want the relationship to have longevity after a betrayal, because that's what, forgiveness comes after a betrayal. Those two are linked. And so a betrayal of any kind, whether that's infidelity or I see a lot of money betrayals, big spends that people didn't know about, things like that. Again, infidelity is kind of that go-to that people think, but there's wide variety of betrayals that occur because a betrayal is when the trust is broken within a relationship. And so the start of moving towards forgiveness is first the apology, right? And having those three components that we talked about that are in an appropriate apology. And then after the apology, then comes the amends, where amends are the actions taken to rebuild trust, right? And then once you can do that, a lot of times people will couple the building of trust with their forgiveness, right? But forgiveness does not have to come with the building of trust, right? When you think of non-romantic relationships where you've been wronged, like you had said, or some major betrayal has occurred and you never get resolution. Like an apology never comes, amends are never made, you can still forgive that person, right? But there's not going to be a relationship with that person. That's the difference, is that if you want to be able to sustain the relationship or have longevity within the relationship, you have to have the trust component in association with forgiveness. But they don't have to be mutually exclusive outside the romantic relationship. Does this make sense?
No, that makes sense. I absolutely agree that you have to be able to rebuild that trust, because if you don't have that trust, well then they're just words.
Yeah.
There's no trust or believability in in that apology.
Yeah. And so, but do you agree with the notion that you can forgive someone even if they didn't make amends or rebuild trust or offer you an apology?
I could speak from personal experience. You can forgive. You can forgive, and like you said, you just don't have a relationship with that person afterwards.
Yeah. Because there's no way to, right? Like how can you maintain a relationship with someone if there's no trust? Mm-hmm. That's really the backbone of so many relational issues that I see, is that they're not able to trust their partner in some some capacity, right? I mean, there's a lot of other hierarchy issues. There's just relationships are so complex, right? So you have, the communication and the conflict management. All of those are insanely important. But if you are unable to trust your partner to have your best interest for you to be safe, right, both physically and emotionally, to feel seen, those are like backbone, base level, core components for longevity. And to circle back, apologizing and truly holding yourself accountable for your behavior is what maintains that trust. Because those are micro betrayals, right? If someone breaks your trust in some capacity, it could be small, right? It doesn't need to be like what we're talking about in infidelity or anything like that. It could just be if they break your trust in some capacity, they don't do what they said they were going to do, right? They said they'd be home at a certain time and they're not. That's a micro betrayal, a really small trust break. And if you don't do the appropriate apology, hold yourself accountable for your behavior, show empathy and acknowledgement of what occurred, and then say what you're going to do differently next time, then those trust breaks lead to erosion. Mm-hmm. That erosion can look different for different couples. It can lead to erosion, and then that creates a resentment. It can create an infidelity. It can create which an infidelity like that, it's escapism, right? Mm-hmm. It's escapism and or avoidance, but that comes from, and again, I want to rephrase, not all infidelities are because of avoidance or escapism because of micro betrayals. I want to be clear on that. It's just, it can be why people sometimes stray is because they are tired. Either way, they're tired of having their trust continuously broken, and so they're trying to make their way out of the relationship and have some sort of escape, or they are, tired of being asked to be held accountable, and they just don't want the accountability. And so, but infidelity is a whole other episode we will do because that is such a complicated topic. But all that to say, that is why apologies are so important. And when you see it, say it, like ask for your apology, acknowledge, what is happening for you in that moment, so that those micro trust breaks don't move down. Exactly. And so I know it can be challenging for you when I do directly and respectfully tell you that you've crossed a boundary or broke my trust in some capacity. I know that's hard, but I do it because I value our relationship so much. I want to make sure that we're not having those micro trust breaks.
And I appreciate that.
But I know it's hard to see in the moment. But that's my
Sure.
that's my long-term strategy is like, no, I want to make sure we don't have the resentment. We don't have these things. But I know in the moment it doesn't feel like that. I know you know that, but it doesn't feel like that.
I acknowledge on both accounts. I know, I appreciate that. I hold such high regard for our relationship and where we want to go as a partnership. But yes, in the moments, I know your intent is there, but it's tough to see in the moment, acknowledging that I'm wrong, and you're trying to kind of combat that in the moment to prevent any resentments or those microaggressions.
Yeah, because the micro trust break or whatever occurred, and so I'm trying to make sure it doesn't move past just that, because couples are going to have those daily, and it's fine, right? But once it moves past or it becomes a series that are unresolved, that's when you get into more trouble. But I know in the moment that reactivity is what hits. I know that's what's hard for you. And it's hard for a lot of people, not just you. But I look forward to the day when you turn it back on me. And like when you come to me and say, Allie, you hurt, like this hurt me. I didn't like this. Can we look at something different? Like I don't know, it'll probably be very, duality will occur in me because I'll be super proud, but at the same time probably be annoyed in all reality. But because it just hasn't been a part of our dynamic. But so as we wrap up, what are some things that you think that couples can kind of incorporate in their relationships when it comes to forgiveness and apologies, especially coming from the perspective of someone who I wouldn't say struggles to give them, but does have a complicated relationship with apologies?
I think, first and foremost, we're human. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
So we're going to make mistakes. And, if you treasure your relationships with people, you need to acknowledge your wrongs. You need to take accountability for it. You need to meet them where they are and understand why they were hurt by your actions. And then, come up with a course of action that is agreeable to both of you to prevent those hurt feelings or breaking of trust or whatever the issue is, to come up with resolution and to stick by it and to try to not make those mistakes repeated. I think those are the big takeaways for me.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I think it's a helpful reminder for couples that respectfully saying to your partner, you've hurt me in this way, or can we do this a little bit different, or hey, I was upset by this, actually puts the relationship on more solid ground and really moves it towards equilibrium.
Yeah, I think if you strive to always be kind, even when you're hurt or emotional, if you can try to be mindful of your tone. I sometimes struggle with recognizing my own tone, and to just be kind.
Yeah.
I think conversations and difficult conversations and apologies, they look a lot different and they can be a lot easier to navigate.
Yeah, and just to be aware, I think, of projections, right? Because that's kind of what happened in the initial reaction, which we'll talk about projections and their influence on a relationship in another episode. But I think sometimes that is also kind of what occur in that initial, because I think it can be, it's a different practice to be able to acknowledge and bring to your partner a hurt feeling and feel safe, and like that is going to strengthen the relationship, because I think a lot of couples choose not to do that because they're afraid it's going to erode it. I mean, I as we're kind of closing out, it makes me think of that heated conversation I had with my daddy about, where someone had hurt their feelings and I had suggested bringing it to that person's attention. And what was I told? Like,
no, you don't have that conversation.
You do not have that conversation.
Sweep it under the mat.
If you want that relationship to maintain, you don't bring it up. And I was like, oh, no. And we had a very heated conversation about it. And, but I don't think that's just my daddy. I think that's a lot of people's narratives.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to tiptoe into those waters.
Because again, I think the automatic assumption is that it's going to harm the relationship. At least that's what my daddy was saying, like from his perspective. And I think that is, I think the initial thing is like conflict harms. Expression harms. And my challenge is,
I think if you don't know how, I'm going to interrupt here. I don't know if you don't properly know how to approach it, it can be like your dad said, and
100%.
it be harmful. You know, if you don't have the steps and the tools to appropriately approach that person and say, hey, you know what you did, it hurt my feelings. If you don't approach that the right way with, you know, a specific person, it could erode the relationship, and your dad's comment would hold water.
You're right. I concede to that. That's very fair. And so I think that is the difference is, you know, are you uncomfortable enough, or are you willing to, let me rephrase, are you willing to obtain the skill sets needed so that you can kind of hit those micro betrayals as they come up so you can really strengthen the relationship? Or to your point, I think that's a very valid statement.
And I would, you know, to all the listeners out there, I would urge you to try to learn these skill sets and apply them, because to what we're saying now, they do strengthen your relationship. You know, it's not fun in the moment to address a conflict, but it's an opportunity to truly strengthen your relationship and make it a deeper connection.
Yeah. But, well, that was a beautiful closure, hun.
Thank you. What are we talking about next session, love?
We are going to talk about navigating conflict, which is really applicable to what we have been talking about leading up to this conversation about what conflict looks like on the day-to-day, and really how navigating conflict, like you said, when you have the right skills, can actually really strengthen your relationship. And when you hit it head on versus being avoidant, because I think, again, a lot of people misinterpret conflict as an automatic relational eroder or destructor or something to that regard. My challenge to that is that if you have the right skill sets, and if you are making sure that your tone and the way of which you are navigating this, it can actually be a very strengthening part of your relationship, because there's no way to avoid conflict. And so that is what we're going to talk about next time. And again, I appreciate you being here for this conversation. I know these conversations can be challenging, but I very much value you, and I really appreciate you being in partnership with me, and I love you.
I love you too.
All right. Next time.
Next time.